Welcome back, everyone. We're looking at lesson 4 today, which is Crusades, Trade, and the Plague. Again, you have the opportunity or the option here of choosing either the slides or the document. I'm going to be working from the document again. Either one would work fine for you. They are the same. But let's move here to today's notes. Chapter 14, Notebook, Lesson 4. Lesson 4, let's go to full screen here to make it a little easier for you to see. Crusades, Trade, and the Plague. The main idea, routes between Europe, Africa, and Asia promoted trade, travel, and communication, as well as the plague, with a capital P on plague there. So routes between Europe, Africa, and Asia promoted trade, travel, and communication, as well as the plague. And related to this is Palestine. This controversial area is considered as the Holy Land by Christians. Not only Christians, but Jews, with a capital J there, comma, and Muslims. It is where Jesus lived and preached. So this controversial area is considered as the Holy Land by Christians, Jews, and Muslims. It is where Jesus lived and preached. And you can see the Israeli flag here on the left, the Palestinian flag on the right, and the hoped-for handshake, which is not always the case. Lots of controversy in the area. If we scroll down to the next map, and you can take a look at that on your own, you can see that the section of Israel is shown, and where there's Palestinian authority over the area in green, Israeli settlements with the little triangles. And I believe it was back in 1967, the 5 Days War, Israel's neighbors attacked them, thinking that they would have a pretty easy war, and actually Israel ended up winning territory in that. The Gaza Strip over here. Next, we have Rome, and we've talked about this before. This city in Italy actually encircles Vatican City. The smallest country in the world. So it is a city within a city. This city in Italy actually encircles Vatican City, the smallest country in the world. There you have a map of it. And St. Peter's Square is where people will gather for masses. A little bit more about it. It is considered the holy center of Christendom and is governed as an absolute monarchy. It is considered the holy center of Christendom and is governed as an absolute monarchy. Next, we have Chang'an. As the Chinese capital during the Han Dynasty, this city was the starting point of the Silk Road. As the Chinese capital during the Han Dynasty, this city was the starting point of the Silk Road. You can see it right here on the map. And that is in the region where the Terracotta Army is located. You may have studied that before, those clay soldiers. Next, we have Dunhuang, located near a beautiful oasis. This Chinese city is where the Silk Road branched. Is where the Silk Road branched into different directions. This Chinese city is where the Silk Road branched into different directions. It was located on the edge of the Taklamakan Desert. On the edge of the Taklamakan Desert. I've seen different spellings of the Taklamakan Desert. I'm going with this one for now. So this Chinese city is where the Silk Road branched into different directions. It was located on the edge of the Taklamakan Desert. If you were to look at an atlas from 40 or 50 years ago of the Taklamakan Desert, you would see that it was much smaller then. And overgrazing and climate change has increased the size of that desert in China. Next, we have Genoa. This is an Italian seaport town where the first cases of the bubonic plague occurred during the plague, with a capital P, the proper noun identifying that particular plague, the big one. This is an Italian seaport town where the first cases of the bubonic plague occurred during the plague. And it's located here in northern Italy. Next, we have Alexius Comnenus. He was the Byzantine emperor who requested help from the Pope in 1095 against the Turks. He was the Byzantine emperor who requested help from the Pope in 1095 against the Turks. There we have a map of the Byzantine Empire with the Black Sea, Mediterranean Sea, Constantinople, which is now known as Istanbul. Urban II. In 1095, Pope Urban II responded to a plea for help against the Turks. It led to the Crusades. I have to make sure that I don't have another slide there. Nope, it led to the Crusades. To expel the Muslims from the Holy Land. In 1095, Pope Urban II responded to a plea for help against the Turks. It led to the Crusades to expel the Muslims from the Holy Land. And I think you can't talk about this time period without mentioning Marco Polo. He was an Italian merchant and explorer who spent 17 years in China. And wrote about The experiences. In the travels of Marco Polo. He was an Italian merchant and explorer who spent 17 years in China and wrote about the experiences in the travels of Marco Polo. Actually, after he returned from China, there was a bit of political strife there, and he was on the wrong side, I guess, and was put into prison. And when he was imprisoned, his cellmate was actually a romance writer, and he encouraged him to write about it. And I believe together they did write about it, came up with the book. Marco Polo was not the only one who spent time in China, but he was the one who wrote about it. And his writing became very popular. Next, we have an epidemic. This is the rapid spread of a disease. Over a wide area. This is the rapid spread of a disease over a wide area. And this term was coined by Hippocrates, from the Greek word epi, meaning on, and demos, people, for epidemic, and the other word, pandemic, from the Greek root pan, meaning all, plus demos, people. So epidemic and pandemic. Crusades. These were 8 major military operations These were 8 major military operations by Christians from Western Europe from 1095 to 1214. Their objective was to win control of Palestine. From the Muslims. So these were 8 major military operations by Christians from Western Europe from 1095 to 1214. Their objective was to win control of Palestine from the Muslims. Then we have the Silk Road. This is the collective term for the several trade routes that ran from China to Europe. And they traversed or covered about 4,000 miles. This is the collective term for the several trade routes that ran from China to Europe. They traversed about 4,000 miles. The map there, I believe, is a German map. Seidenstrabe. I'd have to look that up again to see what it means. Plague. This is the proper noun which defines the time and disease in Europe from about 1347 to 1350. This is the proper noun which defines the time and disease in Europe from about 1347 to 1350. And you can see that's capitalized because it's defining that time. It's another name for a proper noun is proper name, and such nouns are capitalized. So that is why plague in this case is capitalized. Another name for a proper noun is a proper name. Such nouns are capitalized. Again, we have the plague. The disease was spread or transmitted by fleas which were carried by mice and humans. It killed from 1/3 to 1/4 of the population. This disease was spread or transmitted by fleas, which were carried by mice and humans. It killed from 1/3 to 1/4 of the population. It actually killed the fleas too. Their digestive tracts, I believe, were plugged up by the bacteria, and they actually starved to death even though they had a pouch full of blood. The bubonic plague. This was the type of plague associated with the plague, capital P, comma, or Black Death, which it is also known as because of the appearance of it in Europe. This was the type of plague associated with the plague or Black Death in Europe. And it was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, named after Alexandre Yersin, a French and Swiss physician. He had dual citizenship, I believe. He was a physician and bacteriologist, and he helped discover that, and it was named after him. You can see the rod-type bacteria there. So this was the type of plague associated with the plague, or Black Death in Europe. It was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, again discovered by Alexandre Yersin, or I guess in English we'd say Alexander, French Alexandra. The bubonic plague again. Buboes, or swollen lymph nodes, form where there is infection with a comma, I guess, and then turn black, hence the name Black Death. Buboes, or swollen lymph nodes, form where there is an infection and then turn black. Typically on the neck or in the groin area is where the buboes would show up, anywhere from egg-sized to baseball-sized. Painful, I believe. And more for the bubonic plague. Giovanni Boccaccio in 1351 wrote about the plague in Decameron. Giovanni Boccaccio in 1351 wrote about the plague in Decameron. And that comes from the root words, the Greek words deca, 10, and hemera, day, supposedly 10 days. His name is pronounced again Boccaccio, and he gave accounts of what people endured there. And a little more on the bubonic plague here. Areas which were isolated by geography or less developed trade were spared. Those folks who didn't get out and about. Areas which were isolated by geography or less developed trade were spared, such as the Basque Country, Alpine villages, and parts of Belgium and the Netherlands. And that wraps up our notes for Lesson 4. A couple extra pages there in case you want to add anything else.